Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Educator and Ojibwe language warrior Anton Treuer has penned numerous books about Native American history and language learning. But his newest book, Where Wolves Don't Die, is a suspenseful novel that follows an Ojibwe teen on a cultural journey that teaches him about family and community and the sacrifices they're willing to make for him. We're talking with Anton Treuer and his work right after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. A Northern Ontario First Nation is appealing to an international human rights commission over mercury contamination that has continued for decades. As Dan Karpinchuk reports, the Grassy Narrows First Nation has also said it would sue the governments of Canada and Ontario over the contamination.
The moves are aimed at getting those governments to do more to tackle the mercury contamination of the English Wabigoon River system in northern Ontario. Grassy Narrows First Nation recently told a virtual hearing of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights that many of its members have lost hope and that many struggle with work or school. They say after decades of mercury poisoning, they want justice. Canada is one of 35 member states of the Organization of American States, which oversees the Human Rights Commission. Judy De Silva of Grassy Narrows says many in her community, up to 90%, live with the debilitating symptoms of mercury poisoning.
Our way of life has been totally destroyed. Like our people were like proud fishermen, land users and hunters, and this poison came and took all that away.
A recent study by researchers at Ontario's Western University shows that wastewater from the Dryden paper mill is mixing with mercury dumped in the water decades ago to make methylmercurit, an even more toxic cocktail. In the 60s and 70s, the mill dumped 9 tons of mercury into the river. Grassy Narrows chief Rudy Turtle wants action now.
Especially with the new generation and the children that are growing up, the river should be cleaned up for them and they should be compensated because they're still taking mercury into their system.
The mill's owner says it only recently bought the company and would review the study. But the First Nation is suing Ontario and the federal government, alleging that the governments allowed the river system to be contaminated and then failed to do something about it, and at the same time authorizing industrial activities that made the situation even worse. Chief Turtle says he believes something would have been done if it had happened to a different region and population. Turtle wants authorities to ban industrial land use in or near the territory. Meanwhile, construction is expected to begin soon on a mercury care home and take up to 3 years to complete. Work is already underway on a new healthcare facility, and Ottawa says it's committed to the construction of a new water treatment plant. But lawyers for the First Nation call those actions a Band-Aid solution. For National Native News, I'm Dan Karpinchuk.
A Native Youth Art Festival recently celebrated its 10th anniversary on the Cheyenne River Reservation in South Dakota. Kathleen Shannon has more.
The Red Can Graffiti Jam is an art showcase set on the Eagle Butte campus of the Cheyenne River Youth Project, a Lakota youth advocacy organization founded in 1988. This year's event featured hoop dancing, poetry reading, community meals, skateboard painting, and a rock band from Rapid City. 14 graffiti artists from across the world made 9 murals in the campus's art park and the greater community. Given the group's mission to provide opportunities for kids, its executive director, Julie Garrow, says the jam is about more than art.
It's community development. It is youth development. I would also say it's like cultural reclamation. I think it's language revitalization because we're using Lakota language on our walls. I think it's also healing.
Garrow says the jam was designed as a one-time event a decade ago to improve decrepit buildings in town, but it was so well received. She says the organization keeps hosting it. She adds next year, the group has been invited to bring a version of the Red Can Jam to the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. This story was produced with original reporting from Kate Mothis for Arts Midwest. I'm Kathleen Shannon.
And I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Kawanak Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Spark and Ignite a Vision is Vision Maker Media's Hybrid Producers Summit theme Thursday, August 22nd at the Choctaw Cultural Center and virtually through the Whova app. Info and registration at visionmakermedia.org, who support this show. Sexually transmitted infections can be overlooked. Take control, know your status. Free, accurate, confidential, at-home STI HIV test kits at iwanthekit.org. Supported through the Minority HIV/AIDS Fund and the Indian Health Service, a tax-exempt organization.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. As an Ojibwe language teacher and expert on Native American history and issues, Anton Treuer has penned more than a dozen books that are required reading for some college Native Studies courses. But Treuer turns to fiction in his newest work, Where Wolves Don't Die. His first novel is for young readers and focuses on Ezra, a young Ojibwe teen living in Minneapolis. A serious crime prompts a move across the border to the Red Gut First Nation, where Ezra's grandparents live. Here he learns the ins and outs of traplining, hunting, and a subsistence lifestyle. He also gains new insights into his family history and culture, all while a distant danger draws nearer. It's a coming-of-age story that also invokes Anishinaabe culture and language. Where Wolves Don't Die is on our native bookshelf, and Anton Treuer joins us this hour to discuss more. For our Albuquerque listeners, you can hear Anton in person tomorrow night at Bookworks on Rio Grande Boulevard starting at 6 p.m. And you can join us right now by calling in at 1-800-996-2848. If you have a question for Anton or you'd like to give him a shout-out or talk about any of his books, give us a call. That's 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now from Bemidji, Minnesota is Anton Treuer. He is a professor of Ojibwe at Bemidji State University and of Leech Lake Ojibwe descent. Anton, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to Native America Calling.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into this. Now, we mentioned Werewolves Don't Die. This is your first novel. I enjoyed reading it a lot. What inspired your pivot from academic writing into fiction?
You know, I have to say, this has just been a lot of fun for me, but it was also, a very introspective time doing this kind of writing. In my personal life, and I think for this work, it's both personal and professional, we have a very large family. We have 9 kids. I've got 6 out the door, 3 to go, and I've been thinking about my teenagers and coming of age and figuring life out and what comes next. So for me, it was a natural thing to write about and think about. And, at the same time, I found it very liberating to do fiction. I've been so frustrated with most of the fiction that mentions Native people. For starters, until a couple decades ago, most of it was authored by non-Native people who hadn't even talked to one of us or spent any time in our places. It was like the white man's Indian, and all the stories were stories of trauma and tragedy and, Native characters who lamented the culture they never had because of residential boarding schools and stuff like that. And I just thought how out of touch all of it was. It's kind of like trauma porn or something like that. Now, over the past 20, 30 years, we've had a lot more Native authored work, and it's so exciting, and about dang time that more Native people are bringing their voices into the literature. But even there, a lot of the work also still has characters who don't have or live their culture, and we're still talking about, all the traumas and tragedies. And I thought, for me, just raising my own children, not that I've got it all figured out, but I speak Ojibwe. My kids have all had, feasts when they harvested their first year and things like that. And I wanted to do something that would give people a window in to the living, beautiful cultures that Native people still have, at the same time that they get a story full of tension and intrigue, that's engaging. So that's why I decided to marry, a kind of tender coming of age story with a thriller. And, I guess the other thing I did too, I remembered what it was like when I was, in middle and high school, getting assigned a book where I was just yawning and waiting for the class to end. And I also knew what it was like when I had a book that was so exciting that I had to stick it in the middle of my chemistry text and secretly read, while we're supposed to be doing other things. So I wanted that. So I decided to test run this book on my own children, and I read it out loud to them in chapters. And my youngest at the time was 12. The next one was 14. Then I had a 16-year-old. And I knew that if they started picking up their phones or walking away to look for a snack that, I failed. But they were totally into it. And there was, and what happens next? And what's going to happen with this? And who do you think done it? And so to me, those are good indicators that it was working.
Yeah, it sounds like that's super cool. And you have the old family litmus test there, and it came up positive. So that's awesome. And the book is very relatable. It's a contemporary setting. Much of it takes place in Minnesota, which is your home state. And but the main character, Ezra, he doesn't like Minneapolis, and he's got issues with some of the underlying racial issues and social issues. And are you making a comment there with regard to the Twin Cities in Minneapolis and just contemporary urban issues that folks face?
I think one of the other things I'm trying to do with this work is like most of the works out there are either a reservation experience or an urban experience, often full of stereotypes and tropes like, oh, the res, it's so bad. The poverty, the drugs, the despair, the violence, and also this arbitrary line between the United States and Canada, where we have so many tribes, Ojibwe, Cree, Blackfeet, lots of different folks for whom that border crossed right through our communities. And so they're like two totally different worlds. You either have to talk about an urban experience or a reservation experience, either the U.S. or Canada, and we get pigeonholed. And so, I think in my experience, I've got family both sides of the border. One of my sons is enrolled at Nigigoonsiminikaaning First Nation, which we usually call Red Gut, which is where part of the book is focused. These are places we go a lot, and I've done a lot of hunting and fishing and so forth up there. So, to me, it was natural to break through those barriers. Yes, there is a tension about what does it mean to be Indigenous. I think, in my view, honestly, it doesn't, if you are connected to your reservation community and live there, you can be lost or found anywhere. You can be lost on a res, you can be lost in a city, you can be found and culturally alive and aware, on your res or in the city or in the woods. And these are some of the things that I think Ezra's wrestling with, as he is frustrated with the environment and the people and the way that even the snow falling from the sky is dirty immediately and tainted. And, in a way it provides a metaphor for all of the things that our people do deal with, like, the colonization and the oppression and whatever. But but as he's wrestling through that, he wants the world to know that he's a Native person, and he wants to know more about what that really means. So it kind of sets up his journey, in going deeper with that as he spends time with his grandparents and out in the woods.
Well, let's talk more about Ezra and some of the other characters. His grandparents play a big role. He has a father, but they've got a little bit of a tense relationship, and he has a close friend. Her name is Nora, and their relationship evolves as the book progresses. But these characters, are they based at all on any real-life people in your life?
Oh, I had to put the disclaimers in. This is a work of fiction, so they're not based on any one person. But, throughout my own life, I've been surrounded by children because I've been raising so many of them. And also in my professional work, I do work at a university, but I've done a lot of work in K-12, and I officiate at ceremonies, and I'm working with young people a lot in those spaces. At the same time, my world has been full of elders, and I've been working with over 50 of our fluent speaking Ojibwe elders, recording them, transcribing, translating, doing that kind of work, and working, with a lot of our elder culture keepers in ceremony space. And so, they're some of my best friends. And to me, it was natural to have rich, well-developed elder characters as well as young people. And I think this is something, that a lot of Native people experience too, is that, I think a lot of what they often call young adult literature is like a high school drama, and it doesn't necessarily bridge generations, but a lot of us, at least in a Native experience, do have deep connections with, grandparents and things like that, wherever we happen to live. So I wanted to show what that could look like. And honestly, like, all of the characters are shifting and changing, right? So Ezra is going through a big thing. He's the main protagonist. But the grandfather, too, is wrestling with things from his own past, and he kind of shifts and changes, as his connection with Ezra continues to deepen, too. And to me, I think if you've got a story about, the good guy who goes out and fights the bad guys and wins, it's kind of a flat, boring story. But when we have relatable human characters who have, faults and failings and struggles and gifts and hopes and aspirations, it's so much more real and relatable.
The Grandpa Liam character you mentioned, Ezra's grandfather, I think of, Ezra was a great character, but I really could just visualize Grandpa Liam. I could just picture like what he looked like, and even like you describe like how he moves when he's out there in the woods. And I really was able to visualize that character. You just did such a great job of just fleshing him out. And we're going to take a short break here, Anton, but we come back. I want to ask you about what it's like writing from a teen perspective, and maybe your children may be able to help you with that, because I think that's always challenging, as I think we're pretty close in age, and to write from a younger person's perspective might be challenging at times. But at any rate, we're going to take a break. We come back. We're going to talk more with Anton, and we got the phone lines open. Give us a call, 1-800-99-NATIVE. This week marks the anniversary of a skirmish along the Arizona-Mexico border that had lasting implications for Mexican colonization. The Yaqui people joined Mexican rebels in a conflict directed at upending an anti-indigenous dictator. We'll explore the history of the Yaqui uprising on the next Native America Calling.
My name is Tammy, and I'm a member of the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians. Smoking gave me heart disease. I used to think of cigarette smoking as something that only affected me. Then at just 44 years old, I had to look into my mom's eyes on the way into emergency heart surgery and tell her, "Mommy, I promise I won't make you bury me." My tip is, think about the people in your life who love you. They go through the pain too, maybe even more than you do.
The people you love are worth quitting for. You can quit. For free help, call 1-800-QUIT-NOW. A message from the CDC.
You're listening to Native America Calling. We're talking with Anton Treuer today about his new book, Where Wolves Don't Die. It's his first novel, and it features an Ojibwe teen becoming a provider in his community. Join us with comments or questions about the book. We're at 1-800-996-2848. That number again, 1-800-996-2848. Give us a call. We'll get your comments on the air. Anton, let's talk a little bit more about Ezra, the teen protagonist. I think he's about 15 years old, and he likes rock music, and he watches Res Dogs. He's a big fan of that show. And tell us how you got that perspective. Did you rely on your children to kind of help you with those finer details?
I really worked on developing this, but I certainly took to heart anything that the kids had to share. And I did, read it to my youngest three kids. I also had one of my college kids who was driving me around to a gig, a long road trip, and so I read it to him too. And I certainly took their comments to heart. I feel like, even our family group text chat is pretty much all of my children communicating with one another by meme. And I feel like I'm swimming in that universe all the time. So it's not like I was using a Gen Z translator app, although there is actually such a thing, which I mainly use to troll my own kids. Yeah.
Were there any parts where they were like, Dad, no, that's wrong. A teen would never say that today. They'd never do that. They'd never say that. You got to change that.
Yeah. I mean, there were a couple things. They're like, Dad, you just say scroll TikTok, not like scrolling through TikTok videos. Come on. So there were things like that, So I was like, all right, cool, man. We'll make that thing.
Oh, yeah. That's helpful for sure. Let's talk more about the romance. So you have two kind of two parallel romances going on. You have Grandpa Liam and Grandma Emma, right? They've got this this amazing relationship. They're in their 70s and they're just like hot to trot for each other still, which is really inspiring. And then Ezra and his friend Nora, they have one that develops as the book moves along. How do those two relationships complement each other in the book?
Yeah, one of the other things I really say about this and about all Native Lit is a lot of times I think non-Native people look at Native Lit as a way to understand Natives. But they don't necessarily think of Native Lit as a place to look to understand the human experience. And I think we have a lot to say about the human experience, about love, about coming of age, about dealing with life and loss and all kinds of things. And so I hope that people won't read this book and be like, oh, I should go hug an Indian, Hope they'll be like, I'm going to look into the mirror and think about who I see. And maybe I'll go hug my dad or whatever, I hope it will invoke those kind of things. But yes, the love stories were a lot of fun. Liam, for me too, is, I have a special fondness for that character. He kind of embodied some of the behavior traits and things that I've seen, with some of the elders that I have known and worked with very closely. I used to spend a lot of time with Eugene Stillday, for example, from Panema on the Red Lake Reservation, and he and his wife are both, Red Lake full-bloods. They spoke Ojibwe to each other all day, every day. And even when, I'd be taking Eugene to go on a trip to some conference or something, she'd be saying, hey, hey, you boys better behave when you're on the road. And they tease and banter. And he was always so in love with her. And I think it is good and healthy and, to know that is possible and to see what that could look like. It doesn't mean that, Liam and Emma didn't have tensions and things, but like all humans do. But there are ways to find a love that lasts and keep it going. And of course, it provides great, cringeworthy experiences for Ezra, throughout the book. It's kind of a running thing where at first Liam's trying to clear the house and get Ezra out of there. He's mainly been trying to get more time and attention and, deeply, loves his grandson. And then all of a sudden everyone else is gone. He's like, get out, and finally when Ezra figures out what's going on, he's like, gross, and bolts from the house and stuff like that. And so, but eventually, Ezra's, kind of got Grandpa's back and their friendship grows, through that. And I think, for Byron, Ezra's really frustrated, not just with the normal teenage coming of age stuff, and I think all teenagers must break from their parents. It's normal and healthy. And if they're not allowed to do that a little bit, it can actually inhibit some of their development, independence, things like that. And so I don't know, in my experience, the girls often, would mature a little earlier and have a good fight with my wife or, pull away at least. And the boys would usually have it out with me, And I would kind of put that in context and see it for what it was. But it's part of, figuring out adulting. Like, I can solve my own problems, and I have to have my own ideas, and they are also valid. But of course, Ezra is going through a trauma that had happened prior to the start of the book. And, he's kind of displacing some of his, pain as anger with his father and wrestling through all of those things. They kind of mesh and combine. And so it to me, that's like one of the running tensions in the book is, how is this going to work out? And I think you can only tell people what to do so much, but when you show them what it looks like or what to do, then it's different. And I think that's part of how Ezra, comes to terms. And, I'll say this too, I think in literature and even beyond literature itself, we've been doing a little better at holding up more female voices and female authored works and things like that. And it's an emerging effort. It's not complete, and it's about dang time. We are just starting to hold up more works, by people from different gender identities, and it's about dang time. And we've also started to unpack, some of the unhealthy messages that boys get, toxic masculinity, that kind of thing. But something we haven't done very much or very well, and certainly not enough, is just show what would it look like to have healthy masculinity? What would it look like for a teenage boy dealing with the things that we all deal with to come of age, work through adversity, and arrive at a healthy way to be a man? And I do think this book has something powerful to say about that. There's a section where Ezra's having his first kill feast, his first successful harvest, and this is a ceremony that we have done with my children, and it's very, very formative. One of my kids, Isaac, when he was the kind of kid, and I'm sure everybody has someone like this in their family, where in a previous time he would have just been the most promising young warrior in the village, but couldn't sit still in a desk for 5 minutes to save his life. And, was kind of an intense kid. And I remember when he had his coming of age ceremonies, and, they're giving him this message that your job is to look out for people who don't have enough, and, elders who can't harvest for themselves, and your family and community. And he took that to heart so much that one time when he was about 16, I had a friend complaining, "Oh, my back, I can't get out in the woods, and I haven't had venison in my freezer in so long." And my son went out in the woods, harvested a deer, cleaned it up, packaged it up, went to that guy's house and filled up his freezer, and then he left. And my friend's there calling me on the phone like, "Well, I didn't even know anyone remembered that teaching. What an incredible young man. Can I give him some gifts?" And so, the same kid, even his senior year in high school, he was going to double date to the prom with a buddy. So I got him hooked up with a tux. And his friend's mom said, "Well, my next check, I'll get you the tux, I promise." And then her car went down, and she had to tell him, "I'm so sorry, but I can't." And he was all heartbroken, ready to cancel his prom date. My son says, "Forget that, man. Come on." He went to the tux store, cancels his tux, takes the money. They go to the Goodwill. They bought a couple suits. Everybody went to the prom. I show up at the prom to take pictures of my kid in his tux, and I'm like, "Where's that tux?" Only then did I get the story. And I said, "Well, son, why didn't you say something? I would have rented the kid tux." And he said, looked at me like, completely confused. And he said, "But Dad, it's my job to look out for people who don't have enough." And so what I learned from that is that, our cultural practices, sure, they reflect our values as a people. We're collective and communal and, collaborative and things like that. But those are just words. They also shape our values as a people. And he became generous and a caretaker and a provider, because those cultural practices shaped who he was. They didn't just ascribe to a belief system. They instilled it. So, in a way, I think with Ezra's cultural experiences, it's doing that for him, which is what helps engineer his transformation.
Right, right. Let's talk more about those cultural elements, because a good chunk of the book is spent with Ezra learning from Grandpa Liam, and they're out trapping and they're hunting, and it was almost like a tutorial. Like, there's just so much cultural knowledge in there about subsistence living, and I was just like really into just some of those passages, just kind of learning the ins and outs of what it's like running a trap line. And then you've also got a lot of language in there, Anishinaabe words. You've even got a glossary in the back with translations, and that's just all your own knowledge that you had throughout your life that you're just sharing with readers, huh?
Yeah, the book is not an imagining of our culture. It's a window into our culture, even though it's a fictitious story, with the characters. But the cultural practices, those are all things we do. And, I've found that often, like, we should be free to, we can't be so prescriptive. You can only write about what you have personally experienced. Otherwise, only men could write about men, only women could write about women, and things like that. It's too constricting. But there's a lot of cultural appropriation when it comes to Native people in literature, and the imaginings are often really messed up. And so I think it's something that will be pretty fresh. I do speak Ojibwe, and I wanted to, free myself to use that where it added to the story, but not so much to be performative. Like, look, this is an authentic narrative. There's Ojibwe language in there. It's more like, when Liam is talking about, something critical like that first kill feast I just described, where it makes sense that he's operating in the language that he knows best, then it's there, but not so overbearing that, an English reader won't be able to follow the story. So that's why we did, the glossaries and things like that. That language is part of our community, and part of our languages are part of our community and who we are.
What about the cover art? I like that too. The big bear, I think, right? Who's a central part of the book as well.
Yeah. Yeah, Mungijik. He's actually an Ojibwe artist, but he's resident in Vancouver, British Columbia, and he's actually a pretty well-known artist. His works have graced a couple of book covers, and he's got a lot of paintings and other things that are for sale. So at least he's regionally well-known, and I think across Canada, the United States, kind of an emerging force in the art scene. So I thought it was pretty amazing. He had actually sent 3 different sketches, and said, pick one of these and I will further develop it. And so it was actually a very difficult decision. So each one spoke to a different part of the book. And, but I'm really couldn't be more thrilled with how it turned out.
And you've got a glowing review on the cover from Louise Erdrich. And is she a mentor of yours?
She is. I have loved Louise's work from the very beginning. Her first big trilogy that established her as a force in Native Lit, Love Medicine, The Beat Queen, and Tracks. I really love those books. Tracks especially, which is, of all of her works, probably the closest to, the kinds of things you might see in Where Wolves Don't Die, where you've got, elder characters and, a little more time in the woods and those sort of things. So I took inspiration from her, but she has been super kind and supportive. I've actually launched a couple of my books through Birch Bark Books, and we did this one as well. We had to go into the Hennepin County Library in the Twin Cities just to have a bigger venue, but she's been super supportive. But I've been really heartened by the reviews and quotes we've been getting from other great Native Lit forces and so forth. So I just couldn't be happier.
Now, you've got a book reading tomorrow evening in Albuquerque. That's going to be at 6 p.m. at Bookworks. That's on Rio Grande Boulevard. And then, do you do a lot of book readings, Anton? Do you enjoy those?
Oh yeah. First of all, I love humans and love talking to people about the work, and also sharing passages and so forth. Yeah. So the book events are a lot of fun. I do a lot of other kinds of public speaking too. So, I'm busy, and I have a regular full-time teaching job at Bemidji State as well. So, but if anyone's interested in where I'll be and when, there's a full events listing on my webpage, which is just antontreuer.com. So you can find out where I'll be. I'm going to be out in Virginia. I'll be in Chicago, Canada as well. So I'll be in Sudbury, Quebec City. I'll be in Harbor Springs, Michigan, Nashville. And I think we're setting something up in Phoenix here yet this fall too. So shouldn't be too hard to find. And then there are virtual events. There's a YouTube channel too that has, more book and other kinds of talks. And I'm doing an Ojibwe language word of the day with my daughter on there. So there are a bunch of different playlists on the YouTube channel.
All right, so lots going on. And the book title again, Where Wolves Don't Die. And this is the first novel from Anton Treuer. And Anton has focused primarily on academic work throughout his career. I'm going to talk about that more after this break and learn a little bit more about his inspiration for just all of the work that he does with regard to culture and language and other efforts celebrating the Ojibwe heritage and legacy. And we've got the phone lines open still. Let's get some calls going, folks. If you are a fan of Anton Treuer, or you just like Native literature in general, or you're really dialed into some of these new Native teen books that have come out in recent years, give us a call. Let us know your thoughts. Join the conversation. The number is 1-800-996-2848. 1-800-996-2848.
Support by the IAIA Museum of Contemporary Native Arts, Mokna, open during the 2024 Swaya Santa Fe Indian Market, August 16th through the 18th. New exhibitions will be on view, and there will be panel discussions from Indigenous perspectives and demonstrations by Indigenous artists. With no admission charge on Fridays, Mokna is located in downtown Santa Fe and online at iaia.edu/MOCNA.
You have it tuned to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce, and there's still plenty of time to join today's conversation with book author Anton Treuer. His new book is titled Where Wolves Don't Die, and it's a coming-of-age story/drama featuring a mysterious crime, a winter working a trap line, and the revelation of family secrets. If you'd like to ask Anton a question or you have a comment for today's show, call us, 1-800-996-2848. And we've got a caller on the line right now, Chanupa, who is up in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. He listens on Keeley Radio. Chanupa, you're on the air, big brother.
I'm going to do this real simple. Okay? For my elders, what they're doing is what your elders are doing today. And that's what I really, really love it, that they do. Complete to everything. Like they say, Oyate ki taku trochon ki le te hanta, takomane hena echa wosu takilena ete. If our ancestors go back to the way our old ones have done, we can continue everything on from as everything that goes on in what we talk about. So thank you for that. For that brother that's speaking, I want to give him I'm going to give it all to him. He's the only one talking to our people. So it kind of gets me. It kind of gets me in the butt. So thank you, Sean. I'm going to say it to you. Aho, brother. Keep it up. Aho.
All right, big brother. Thank you for calling in. And Anton, feel free to respond to Chanupa, because you know what? Chanupa kind of reminds me a little bit of Grandpa Liam.
Yeah. First of all, Miigwech, thank you for the good words and the encouragement. I believe in our native ways and in our language. I feel like 7 generations ago, our people were going through a tough time, and they were thinking, what are we going to need today? And they thought we would need land and clean water and our language, our cultures, and one another. And when I think 7 generations from now, what are they going to need? I think they're going to need the very same thing. So in many ways, you know, in my view, 7 generations from now, no one's going to remember my name, doesn't matter how many books I write. But if our language lives, if our cultures thrive, if our people are healthy, then all the strivings are worth it. And, you know, that's what I hear in your good words, Chanupa. Appreciate the support.
All right, let's take another caller. This is Michael, and he's a regular listener of NAC as well. He lives in Jemez Pueblo, New Mexico, and he listens to the show on KUNM. Hello, Michael. You're on the air.
Hey, yeah, thanks for taking my call. Great show, yeah. I was telling the call speaker that, you know, it's this book and the author and the whole hot topic is so reflective of my life. You know, I went to a boarding school in Santa Fe, went to somewhat boarding school in New Mexico Military Institute, finished up at Fort Lewis College, and been an avid hunter and fisherman. And I've got boys and I've got daughters, and I've taught them how to hunt and fish, and now they're teaching their kids the same. And I come from two different cultures. I mean, 2 different native cultures. You know, the Jemez and the Acoma, and both have taught me a lot of things that I use, and I also are reflective on my children. And it's just, I don't know. There's so much to just open up. Like I do open up and like this, and once in a while, you know, like a commercial where you reach into the screen and open it up, and there's that what you call it, sparklers going on around it. And you step into it, and sometimes you're so immersed that you almost think you want to change this and that, but it has already happened, you know. So it's a great topic, and like I said, thanks for reopening my mind and my experiences.
Oh, right on, Michael. Thank you for that call as well. And Anton, Michael, regular listener, he has also, in addition to what he shares with regard to culture and hunting, he also has a lot of brilliant artists in his family as well. So feel free to respond.
Yeah, thank you so much for the call, Michael. I really appreciate that. You know, I've been thinking about healing a lot. Not just for me as an individual, but I help a lot of people in our ceremonies who are looking for healing on all levels. You know, my own grandmother was taken from her family as a small child and sent to residential boarding school, like so many people in her generation. And it was just such a, you know, terrible oppression that she had to experience. And, you know, I think one of the things that I reflect on a lot is how do we metabolize these things that have happened that we have no control over? Because if we just dwell upon all of the injuries, there's enough there, you know, over the past 500 years to keep us mad for another 500 years. And that won't get us justice, and it also won't help us heal and live longer, healthier, happier lives. So in a way, you know, the voicing of these experiences and stories that many of us, you know, have either had ourselves or can relate to because somebody in our family has, you know, we can actually come to different terms. It doesn't mean that the, you know, bad things didn't happen or that we're going to just, you know, have toxic positivity and turn the frown upside down. We have to go through the things. But at the same time, we can look at everything that our ancestors have done. And, you know, I think we're right where we should be, having been through all the things our people have been through. And in spite of it all, in spite of all the hardships, we still have living languages. We still have our cultural practices, our dances. It's not by accident. It's by the very thoughtful efforts and prayers and community building work that all of our people have been doing throughout generations and continue to do right now. And that it's not, you know, ignorant to look at all of those positive things and think, where are we going from here? And in a way, you know, Where Wolves Don't Die is showing Ezra bumping into all of those things, but creating a different arc for his life, one where he knows his culture in his community and his family and who he is and where he wants to go, and at least has aspirations for, you know, what a healthy relationship and other things could look like. And he's, you know, I think if you look at the three teenage characters in the story, there's Matt, Nora, and Ezra, each have had a loss in their family. And each have metabolized the loss in a different way. Matt kind of got swallowed up in the darkness. Nora, you know, in spending a lot of time with her mother and grounding in family and community. And Ezra's going through it all and trying to figure out which way am I going to go, you know? And as he's bumping around and into these things and wrestling with the feelings, I think the culture and the community and his elders provide a pathway, you know, that arcs toward healing. Not that everything's buttoned up perfectly or neatly, but certainly you can see that. And I think we all desperately want and need the healing, and where can we find it? But I think one of the secrets is, you know, our culture or our healing experience. It's not out there over the next hill in some other place. It's right here inside of us. And that being, you know, healing is not a destination we get to. It's something we practice every day. And some days we do better than others. And I think it just, you know, it's an effort to show where that could take somebody.
Right, right. A journey. That's so well put, Anton. Anton, let's talk a little bit about your academic work, because, you know, so much of what you have done really boils down to the Native representation, and you're talking about that now. And I'm just curious, like, when you write a book of fiction and you draw on some of these issues, deep-seated issues like residential schools and racism and just other issues that we have faced as Native people, and then you also write about those issues academically as well. And do you have to approach that differently when writing it from a fictional standpoint as opposed to a nonfiction standpoint? Maybe walk us through that process a little bit, because that fascinates me, how you have to pivot like that. Same issues, but just a different approach.
It is different, and I think some people don't make the transition, you know, from nonfiction to fiction very well, because they are so different. But I'll say this. First of all, I've been surrounded by story and telling stories my whole life. It's not just from growing up in a big family and raising a big family and all the banter around the kitchen table, although I'm sure that helps. But, you know, in our cultural context, we are telling stories all the time. You know, I just spent 2 weeks camped out at our medicine dance ceremonies, you know, and we're just operating in Ojibwe, and the storytelling is a big part of the ceremony itself, the legends and stuff. And, you know, even when you're doing a history book or something like that, you're still telling story. But with fiction, it's different. And it's different because if you think about the true history of any human being's life, it's not a simple arc and you're done in a couple hundred pages. You know, like, everything's incomplete. We all pass away with unfinished work, you know. And so, you know, with a novel, you're taking each of the characters on an arc, you know, for their own development. And the narrative itself has to also, you know, maintain tension throughout it. So the craft of storytelling is different. And I actually had other sections I was originally planning to put in the book that I ended up pulling out just so that the main plot elements could keep sizzling along. I was going to have a big storm sequence, you know, and other things. So I ended up having to make some decisions just for the benefit of the storytelling arc and the timing of revelations and things like that. So I wasn't just swimming around in the details. Otherwise, it would have been a book, you know, of kind of non sequitur dreams, aspirations, and feelings. And it's hard to maintain engagement if you do something like that. So there was, you know, to be thoughtful about storycraft, but at the same time, you know, had to be thoughtful about, you know, each of the characters and their development and keep it real, you know. So hopefully, everybody who reads it will see those things.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they will. And
once you publish something that just belongs to the book gods, you never know what's going to happen.
Right. What's next, Anton? I mean, are you going to continue with more fiction? Is there perhaps a sequel in the works from Where Wolves Don't Die? Are you going to go back and focus more on your academic work, or what are your plans?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I do get this question a lot, but I'll say that, first of all, I don't like to talk about projects before they've hatched. It's easier for me to put all the energy into creating the next thing. There most definitely will be a next thing. And I'll just say that I do plan to do more fiction and also more nonfiction. So plenty more to come. I probably as time saturated as anybody out there, but, I definitely plan to block the time and continue to create.
And what kind of hobbies and interests do you have outside of your writing and all of your work? I mean, you talk a lot about your family, but what kind of stuff do you folks like to do when you're just hanging out?
Oh, well, first of all, it's a big family of indigenous nerds who are also outdoorsy people. So, like every November, we are very busy hunting. I have lots of fun. All my kids love to hunt, boys and girls. So it's just a lot of fun having everybody out in the field when we're doing that. They also like to travel, and so we try to do family vacations. I even took everybody to Austria at one point and emptied my bank account, but we had a really great experience. And my kids kind of are the party everywhere we go. I also we have a very busy ceremony calendar. I spend probably 6 weeks just officiating at ceremonies. We'll be camped out for long periods of time when we're doing that, and all the kids come. And so they have their own, there's a social experience in addition to the ceremony experience there. And friends from all over Ojibwe country, gather together. So we do all of those sorts of things. My wife and I also get away and, try to at least have one good vacation a year. We were up in Seattle here this summer. Usually it's a spring
like Grandpa Liam and Grandma Emma, huh? You like to get away and do your own thing.
Yeah, you need a little bit of both.
Oh, right on. Anton, I've enjoyed talking with you so much today, but you've got a flight to catch, brother. So I better let you go, huh? You
Yes, I do. I'm on my way to Albuquerque. Anybody who's regional would love to see you there. And I appreciate the conversation, all the thoughtful questions and deep reading of the work. I appreciate you, brother.
You bet. Well, once again, big thanks to joining us today and just all you've done over your whole career, all the writing that you've done, all the knowledge and the wisdom that you have shared with us. It's just been such a gift, and we are all so appreciative. And I also want to remind our Albuquerque audience that Anton will be reading from his book tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. at Bookworks on Rio Grande Boulevard. Bookworks, that is an independent bookstore in the North Valley of Albuquerque, and that'll be 6 p.m. tomorrow evening. So that's why Anton's got to get on the road there, get to the airport, and head on down to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow for a history lesson about Yaqui resistance in Mexico and northern Arizona. This week marks the anniversary of an important battle in Yaqui history. Hope you'll tune in. I'm Sean Spruce.
We're powerful when we know ourselves, like knowing our status for HIV and sexually transmitted infections, also known as STIs. Privacy concerns stop many from getting tested. I Want the Kit offers free, confidential, at-home HIV and STI testing. You can collect your samples in privacy, return using the mailing envelope provided, and check results online. Take control, know your status. Get the kit at iwanthekit.org, supported through the Minority HIV/AIDS Fund and the Indian Health Service, a tax-exempt organization.
Skuktash, aar ohusi has haichu, hagohon, goes jukto, kamohanye gamama kay matpikoy and moi shofron wak marsha mato chichika. By chaichu opos machim kamoy hawum nyunyo gamama kay, abo inuik, insurekidsnow.gov, or moi hagugadak, humako gigik, sikor kwai kumako gigik, go kutas pumuk jut, idop amjut humuk centers for Medicare to Medicaid chipka.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.